for today's 6-day training program. Already you know our chief trainer, Honorable Justice Muhammad Iman Ali, performing the functions of the Honorable Chief Justice of Bangladesh, will be appear as first resource person. His topics will be Constitution in Mediation, and second resource persons will be appeared Mr. Honorable Justice Ahmad Sail, Judge, High Court Division, Supreme Court of Bangladesh. His topic will be ethics and conduct of the mediators. And third research person will be appeared as research person Mr. Kevin Barry Brown, President, Mediation International. His topics will be to discuss the book Getting to Yes. Lordship, Justice, Honorable Justice Imanali, sir, can we proceed?
Yes.
Dear friends, now I am requesting requesting Honorable Justice Muhammad Iman Ali performing the functions of the Honorable Chief Justice of Bangladesh to present his topic.
Thank you, Mr. Goswami. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Adab. Today's topic, for my part, is quite short, but it is very important. I shall try to emphasize the connection between Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, our constitution, and mediation. And I hope that from this, you will see why we are trying to do what we are doing, or what we have been doing for the last 5 days. We are trying to promote mediation in order to bring peace to our society. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, even before Bangladesh came to being, was always for the benefit of the people. He loved his people, he cared for his people, and similarly, the people cared for him, and that is obvious from the March 7 meeting in the racecourse, when at his beck and call, 20 lakh people assembled, 2 million people assembled in the meeting, and at the same time, at his beck and call, 7.5 crore people rose for the liberation of Bangladesh. He wanted justice for his people. He wanted to create the Golden Bengal, Sonar Bangla. And this is obvious when he created the constitution with the help of luminaries, some of whom are still among us. He created a constitution which was for the people, for the benefit of the people. He had always the people in his mind. What his wish was is manifested in the provisions of the Constitution. I cannot go through the whole of the Constitution, but let me just mention just 1 or 2 provisions within our Constitution, which will highlight the aims and goals of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the intention that he had towards creating a socialist society, a society free from exploitation, a society where people would have access to justice. The preamble of our Constitution says that it is the fundamental aim of the state to realize through democratic process a socialist society, and there should be no exploitation, and there should be rule of law, fundamental human rights and freedom, equality and justice, political, economic, and social, and that shall be secured for all the citizens of this country. And to that end, we have tried to create a legal system which would be equal to all. The Constitution says all citizens are equal before the eye of law, and all citizens will be treated in accordance with the law. The law is the Constitution as well as other acts of Parliament. Constitution is the supreme law of this country, and there is no doubt about that. The preamble further says, our sacred duty is to safeguard, protect, and defend this Constitution, and to maintain its supremacy as the embodiment of the will of the people. Everywhere you will find that the people is always in the back of the mind. The whole of our scheme, the whole of our system is for the benefit of the people, so that we may prosper in freedom and make our full contribution towards international peace and cooperation in keeping with the progressive aspirations of mankind. So there we are talking not only of people of this country, but people of the whole world, mankind. We want a humane society, a society with peace among all the people of the nations. This Constitution is as a solemn expression of the will of the people. It is the supreme law of the Republic. Bangabandhu wanted to create a socialist economic system which shall be established with a view to ensuring the attainment of a just, egalitarian society, free from the exploitation of man by man. So he wanted equality among the people. Again, we are talking about the people. And then internationally, he said, it is said in the Constitution, the state shall base its international relations on peaceful settlement of international disputes and respect for international law and the principles enunciated in the United Nations charters. And Article 145A of our Constitution goes on to say how we will deal with international agreements and covenants and other international instruments. So the main purpose of the Constitution is always towards the benefit of first the citizens of this country, and then next the citizens of this world, the whole of the mankind. And Bangabandhu in his heart had this intention, and that is manifested in our Constitution. Now let us go back to the rule of law. What is the rule of law? The Constitution says, ensure the rule of law. The rule of law, if you look at all the laws of our country, of any country, is the bedrock of democracy. There cannot be democracy in any society without a rule of law. It is the essential element of the rule of law is, of course, access to justice. We have talked about this before. I will just repeat it very briefly. Access to justice means that the people must be able to get their justice, the delivery of justice. They must have access to the justice delivery system without any problems, without any hassle, without too much expense. That is what we are trying to achieve by our activities in mediation. Very eminent writer, of English administrative law, H.W.R. Wade. He said, if access to justice is unduly slow and expensive, the rule of law is diminished. And that stands to reason. If I cannot get justice for years together, for decades, then it is no justice. And Bangabandhu felt and he experienced for himself the deficiencies in our justice delivery system. He was incarcerated in prison for much of his life. And he saw from inside the prison, as well as from outside the prison, how the public of this country, the people of this country were suffering under the different legal provisions. And they were suffering because they could not have access to the justice system. They could not get quick justice delivery. They could not achieve their rights. Excuse me, I have to take this call. It's from the court.
Sir, we cannot hear you.
Sir, wait. She attend on call.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm on duty. So I have to take emergency call, urgent calls from the court. I've dealt with that. There's some problem, but anyway, that's a different thing. So let me go back. So H.R. Wade said, if access to justice is unduly slow and expensive, then the rule of law is diminished. And without the rule of law, as we have said at the beginning, that it cannot be any democracy. Now, what happened during the COVID? People could not access the courts. A judge in Canada said that it is a constitutional responsibility to ensure access to justice remains available at all cost in all circumstances. And that is why we had our honorable president was able to enact an ordinance in order to allow us to have virtual hearings. And that is the result of what today we are getting the benefit of the virtual hearing system, which has been set up as a result of COVID. Anyway, that is the different issue. So the rule of law is the prime objective of the Constitution. And for the rule of law to be ensured, there must be access to justice. Now, let us now relate to where we are. As I said, Bangabandhu was frustrated by the delay in the justice delivery system. He said in his book that a case is filed by a person and the case is continued by his son and then his grandson. A case is filed through a lawyer. The lawyer passes on and the case is taken over by his son-in-law. And that is the fact. I think all of us realize the delay in our system. All of us know about the backlog of cases. We have about 4 million cases backlog. So we have to find alternative. Bangabandhu said in his book that we must find an alternative justice delivery system for our country, for the benefit of our people. And I believe that this is where mediation comes in. We go back to mediation because mediation, as you have heard the last 5 days, is quick, it is inexpensive, it brings peace. It is confidential. It is all the way beneficial for the people. And that is why we are trying to make sure that what happens, somebody is sharing the screen. Can you please stop sharing? Ali Akbar. Thank you. Now, as you have been told, I have said many a times that mediation is the way forward. And that is why we are trying to make sure that we have sufficient mediators. We want a system whereby we can realize the aim and goal of our constitution. We can realize the dream of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, that we can create a better justice delivery system for our people, as is mandated by our constitution. So I think I will stop here. I have some urgent business to do. I will be still online. If there is any questions from any of you, please let me know. I will try to answer as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Goswami. Please excuse me. Please continue with the other.
Yes, sir, I know, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Many thanks to you, sir. Yes, sir. Already we know, sir, today's peace conference will be held and at 4 p.m. And from you and from our trainees, judges, we send a message to that international peace conference. Now, can I request Mr. Honorable Justice Ahmad Sahil, sir, to present your topic.
Thank you, Mr. Goswami. Honorable Mr. Justice Mahmood Iman Ali, the Honorable Judge of Appellate Division, now performing the functions of Chief Justice of Bangladesh, distinguished resource person, participant judges, mediators, friends from the mediation community, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to all of you. It is really a great pleasure and honor for me to be part of this 40 hours training program as a resource person. You have already heard from the chief trainer, Justice Mahmood Iman Ali, already discussed about the constitution and mediation in a very lucid manner. In fact, I'm also enlightened from his speech. To understand the ethics and code of conduct for the mediators, it is necessary to know the whole process of mediation. I will discuss it in a very concise way to give you a connection between the ethics and code of conduct with the other system. Now, starting with the history of mediation, which goes back to ancient Greece, where village people, elders, used to mediate local disputes between the villages. Mediation is not something new in this subcontinent. Like India, Bangladesh had utilized the system called panchayat, which is later on known as shalish, which is still continuing in Bangladesh. In pre-British India, mediation was popular among businessmen. Impartial and respected businessmen called mahajans were requested by the business association members to resolve disputes using an informal procedure which combined mediation and arbitration. Now let me share my slides, screen share, so that you will understand. Share. Can you see the slide?
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So now starting with what is mediation, you can see there is no specific definition in English law what is mediation. But however, according to Black's Law Dictionary, you can see it in the screen. And also I've quoted International Mediation Institute definition. What is mediation is negotiation facilitated by trusted mediator person. Basically, in simple terms, what is mediation is a process where a neutral and independent person, the mediator, helps the parties in a dispute to reach their own solution. The parties usually agree who will be the mediator for their dispute, except in court and ex mediation. In mediation, each party has the opportunity to voice their point of view. The mediator helps the parties to focus on the real issues of the dispute and explore options to resolve these. The mediator does not impose a solution or give tactical advice. It is the duty of all parties to mediation to participate in good faith. And mediation is available for all civil matters. Mediation process is informal, which means it is governed by rules. It is not governed by the rules of evidence and formal rules of procedure. Mediator cannot be called upon to testify any proceeding or to disclose to the court as to what transpired during the mediation. Now, in the next slide, next slide, who can be a mediator? There's no strict requirement who can be a mediator. Mediators usually come from various professional backgrounds and have undergone training in mediation skills and techniques. And they must have some qualities: the highest standard of honesty, integrity, conduct, and behavior. They should maintain neutrality, objectivity, and judgment, not judgmental. He must have patience, persistence, and perseverance, good communication skills, open-mindedness, flexibility, and creativity. Also, in our country, as per Section 89A of CPC, judge himself or the legal aid officer, as per Section 21, subsection 2 of under Legal Aid Act 2000, could be a mediator. Court can also appoint mediator from the panel prepared by the district judge with consultation with the president of the respective bar association, also from pleaders, retired judges, or person trained in dispute resolution could be the mediator. However, a person holding office of profit cannot be a mediator. Now, the types of mediation. You can see that there's two types of mediation: court and ex mediation. It applies to cases pending in court according to Section 89A of the Code of Civil Procedure. The court refers in the case for mediation after filing of written statement. So that means the court and ex mediation is conducted while the cases are still pending in court, which is done by a court order. And in Bangladesh, after amendment in 2012, it is mandatory to refer any dispute in civil nature for mediation after filing of written statement. For court and ex mediation, there is no charge or the use of room, and for the cost of the mediator, no fees for the mediator. The cost of legal representation is the responsibility of each party. And you see the private mediation, where the qualified mediators offer their services on a private fee-for-service basis to the court, members of the public, to members of the commercial sector, also to the government sector to resolve disputes through mediation. Private mediation can be used in connection with disputes pending in court and pre-litigation disputes. Now, turning to the advantage of mediation, many advantages of mediation rather than going for a prolonged litigation. First, the parties have control over the mediation. It is participative, voluntary, speedy, efficient, and cheaper. The procedure is simple and flexible and time bound. You see that in our section 89A, there's a time limit for 60 days for completion of mediation. And in addition to that, the court has the power to so motu extend 30 days, and on the prayer of the parties, they can extend 30, or on the prayer of the parties, they can extend 30 days. And 7 days for pronouncing the degree as per the Order 23, Rule 3. So can understand that this time bound. You can have a short in a short time. You can have a settled matter instead of going for a prolonged litigation. The process is informal, cordial, and conducive. It is a fair process, preserves relationship. Process is confidential, which is the essence of this mediation process, which is a big advantage for both the parties. Mediation focus in resolving the dispute in a mutually beneficial settlement. Mediation allows creativity in dispute resolution. It promotes finality. The disputes are put to rest fully and finally, as there is no scope for any appeal or revision or further litigation, as per section 89A of the Code of Civil Procedure. Refund of court fees if it is settled by the court and it is a mediation, court-preferred mediation. So the situation is like win-win outcome for both the parties. Without prejudice, that is what is said by you or by the party will not be used against you as evidence if your case proceeds to trial. Finally, it helps to reduce pressure on judiciary. So these are the advantages. Then comes to role of mediator. Is the decision making is not the role of the mediator, it is role of the parties. The role of the mediator includes both facilitative role and evaluative role. Facilitative role, there is creating a conducive environment for the mediation process, explaining the process and its ground rules. Ground rules suppose that you switch off the mobile phone, you don't talk when other people are talking, or something like the mediator sets a ground rule, treating everyone at the conference with great respect, remain silent and seated, calm. And mediator does not take sides and does not judge who is right or wrong. Parties are generally but not always represented by legal counsel, where the mediator settlement needs to be reduced to a legal agreement or consent court order. In my opinion, it's better to have a counsel to be involved. In facilitative role, a mediator facilitates the process of mediation by creating a evaluative role now. So the evaluative role, mediator performs an evaluative role by helping and guiding the parties to evaluate their case through reality testing, assessing the parties to evaluate the options for settlement. The reality testing I'll discuss later on. Next stage is stages of mediation. I'll discuss in very short way. Stage 1 starts with introduction and mediator's opening statement. In this stage, the mediator introduces himself by giving the information, such as his name and qualification. Mediator requests the parties and their counsels, if they are present, to introduce themselves. Mediator expresses the hope that the matter will be amicably resolved in order to get the trust and confidence of each party. In the opening statement, the mediator explained to the parties the concept, process, advantages, stages of mediation, role of parties, the ground rules of mediation, which I have told earlier. And there is no specific or prescribed sitting arrangement in a mediation session. However, the sitting arrangement would be better if the mediator can have eye contact with the parties and he can facilitate effective communication between the parties. Each of the parties and his counsel are seated together. All persons present feel at ease, safe, and comfortable. Now, coming to the second stage is the joint session. The objective of this to gather information, understand facts, and assess also the obstacles and possibilities. Mediator invites both the parties to present their case. First, the plaintiff is given an opportunity to state their case in own words, followed by his counsel, who can present and state the legal issues involved in the case. Likewise, the defendant is given an opportunity, followed by his counsel. Mediator shall identify the area of agreement and disagreement between the parties and should encourage the communication to get additional information. Next stage is separate session or private caucus. The objective of this session is to understand the dispute at a deeper level, to encourage the parties to generate options and find terms that are mutually acceptable. The mediator gathers information by identifying each party's differential priorities or the differential aspects of the dispute. The mediator, in order to move the process forward, engage in reality testing, in which the mediator assists the parties to understand the reality of their case and shift the focus on problem solving. The mediator offers options which he feels serve the common and maximum interest of each party. Now you'll see the reality testing techniques. In reality testing is often done in a separate session. First, they're asking effective questions. Mediator may ask parties questions that gather information, clarify facts, or alter perceptions of the parties with regard to their understanding and assessment of the case and their expectations. Discussing the strengths and weaknesses of the respective cases of the parties without breach of confidentiality. The mediator may ask the parties or counsel for their views about the strengths and weaknesses of their case and the other side's case. Considering the consequence of any failure to reach an agreement, the partner is best alternative to negotiated agreement, Watna, worst alternative to negotiated agreement, and Latna, most likely alternative to negotiated agreement. By using the above techniques, the mediator assists the parties to understand the reality of the case, give up their rigid position, identify the genuine interests and needs, and shift their focus to problem solving. Then the parties are then encouraged to explore several creative options for settlement. Another technique is brainstorming. Brainstorming is a technique used to generate options for agreement. Two stages in the brainstorming process is the creative option, where parties are encouraged to freely create possible options for agreement. Options that appear to be unworkable and impracticable are also included. All ideas are written down so that they can be systematically examined later. In evaluating options, after inventing options, the next stage is to evaluate each of the options generated. The objective of the stage is to criticize any idea, but to understand what the parties find acceptable, not acceptable about each option. This information further helps to find terms that are mutually acceptable to both parties. Now coming to the fourth stage, joint negotiation and exchange of offer. After caucuses, the mediator might bring the parties back together to negotiate directly. The mediator carries the options offers generated by the parties from one side to the other. The parties negotiate through mediator for a mutually acceptable settlement. However, negotiations fail, the settlement cannot be reached, the case is sent back to the referral court. Now, the final stage is a closing session. It has two parts, where there is a settlement. The parties are reassembled. The mediator orally confirms the terms and reviews them in writing. The agreement is signed by the parties. Also, the mediator affix is signed on the signed agreement. In the closing statement, the mediator thanks the parties for their participation and help in reaching the solution. And where there is no settlement, the case would be returned to the referral court, merely mentioning not settled. The statements made during the mediation will be kept confidential and should not be disclosed by any party or an advocate or the mediator to the court or outside the court. These stages in process of mediation are therefore carrying out the mediation in a smooth manner. If the stages are not followed properly, then it becomes difficult for the mediator and the parties to come up with a successful settlement. Now, coming to today's topics, the ethics. You can see in this slide, for Black's Law Dictionary, the word meaning ethics can go through it. In my simple term, I will explain it. Ethics is the process of determining what one considers right and wrong actions. This may sound easy, but in reality, it's a complicated task. Right and wrong are dictated by one's perspective and may vary according to culture, moral climate, and individual circumstance. What may be right principle or action for one party may be absolutely wrong for another. To help navigate through this ambiguity, we need some guidelines for decision-making and action. Ethics plays an important role in mediation. It works as a trust factor on which both the parties to a dispute rely on. The law of ethics and code of conduct are interrelated. Code of conduct is the practical application of code of ethics. In other words, the code of conduct explains what mediators must do to implement the code of ethics. It has developed guidelines of code of conduct as several as general ethical and practical framework for the practice of mediation. These guidelines of code of conduct are intended to apply to all types of mediation. Particular professional and other bodies may have different requirements. The guidelines of code of conduct for mediators are intended to provide standards that guide mediators in the performance of their duties and functions, promote good governance in the mediation services, promote public confidence and trust in the process of mediation for resolving disputes. The guidelines of code of conduct are based on the work of 4 professional groups in the United States: the American Arbitration Association, the American Bar Association, the Society of Professionals in Dispute Resolution, and the Association for Conflict Resolution, and also members of the Law Council of Australia, Expert Standing Committee on Alternative Dispute Resolution. More or less, these model standards of code of conduct for mediators are usually accepted as the basic ethical requirements for any mediator. Now let me see the ethics and code of conduct for mediators. First one is principle of self-determination. A mediator shall conduct mediation based on the principle of self-determination. It is the right of parties to mediation to make their own voluntary and non-coerced decision regarding the possible resolution of any issue of dispute. Every mediator shall respect and encourage this fundamental principle of mediation. The mediator shall provide the parties at or before the first mediation session with information about their role in mediation. The mediator shall discuss the fact that authority for decision-making rests upon the parties, not with the mediator. Mediator shall not provide legal or professional advice to the parties. The mediator may express views or opinions on the matters at issue and may identify, evaluate approaches, and where the mediator does so, it shall not be construed as either advocacy on part of the party or as legal or professional advice to a party. Mediator shall, where appropriate, advise unrepresented parties to obtain independent legal advice. The mediator shall also, where appropriate, advise parties to the need to consult with other professionals to help parties make informed decisions. Next one is independence and impartiality. A mediator may mediate only those matters in which the mediator can remain impartial and even-handed. If at any time the mediator is unable to conduct the process in an impartial manner, the mediator should withdraw. Accordingly, mediator must avoid partiality or prejudice and such conduct that gives any appearance of partiality or prejudice. Mediators should be conscious of behavior which, however innocent, may be interpreted as indicating partiality or prejudice. For example, spending more time with one party than another without good reason, socializing with a party and adopting different modes of address. A mediator should neither give nor accept a gift, favor, loan, or other item of value that raises a question as to mediator's actual or perceived impartiality. Even if all the disputants agree that they would like the mediator to express an opinion on the merits, there is a substantial risk in giving such an opinion that mediator may no longer appear to be impartial. As a result, the mediator may be obliged to withdraw. Next one is conflict of interest. Before mediation begins, the mediator must disclose all actual and potential conflicts of interest known to the mediator. Mediator should discuss any circumstances that may be seen to affect the mediator's independence or impartiality, and at all times be transparent about the mediator's relation with the parties in the mediation process. Disclosure must also be made if conflicts arise during the mediation. After making disclosure, the mediator may proceed with the mediation if all parties agree and the mediator is satisfied that conflict will not preclude the proper discharge of the mediator's dispute. After mediation, the mediator must not act in such a manner as to raise legitimate question about the integrity of the mediation process. Next one is competence, mediator's competence. A mediator must not mediate unless the mediator has the necessary competence to do so, to satisfy the reasonable expectations of the parties. Competence comprises appropriate knowledge and skills, which would normally be acquired through training, education, and experience. Mediators should have available for the parties the information regarding their training, education, and experience. If a mediator's ability to conduct mediation is impartial, impaired by drugs, alcohol, medication, otherwise he shall not conduct the mediation. When a person is appointed or nominated to a panel or list of mediators by the appointing authorities, court, tribunal, or institution, they should ensure that the mediator has thorough training, education, and experience, acquired the necessary knowledge and skill for inclusion on the particular panel or list. Next one is confidentiality. This is the essence of mediation actually. Subject to the requirements of the law, a mediator must maintain the confidentiality required by the parties. As the parties' expectations regarding confidentiality are important, the mediator should discuss those expectations with the parties and endeavor to meet them. The mediator should clarify when a mediation begins and when it ends, and conversation on the telephone, in meetings, and communications by email and other means are also confidential. A mediator should not disclose any matter that a party requests to keep confidential, including information about how the parties acted in mediation process, the merits of the case, any settlement, offers, or agreed outcomes, unless the mediator is given permission to do so by all persons attending a mediation with an interest in the preservation of confidence. The mediator is required by law to do so. The parties and the mediator may make their own rules with respect to confidentiality or accepted practice of the mediator, or an institution may mandate a particular set of expectation. If a mediator intends to hold a private session with the party, the mediator should, before such session, discuss with the parties the confidentiality attaching to them. With the permission of all the parties, researchers may be permitted to access to individual case files, to observe mediation, and to interview participants. When materials emanating from a mediation are used for research, supervision, or training purposes, the mediator should remove all identifying information from them. Mediators shall maintain confidentiality in the storage and disposal of mediation notes, records, and files. Next is the quality of process. Mediator must conduct mediation in keeping with all following qualities such as diligence, timeliness, safety, presence of appropriate participant, procedural fairness, party competency, honesty, and must respect among all participants. Mediators shall make reasonable efforts to ensure the parties understand the mediation process before mediation starts. The mediator must address with the parties any instances of deceit, fraud, and misleading statements before any settlement is reached. Next one is agreement to mediate. Before mediation starts, mediation shall ensure that parties understand the terms of mediation, whether or not they are contained in an agreement or contract to mediate. The terms shall include, but not limited to, confidentiality of communication and documents, the right of the mediator and parties to terminate, suspend the mediation, the fact that the mediator is not compellable as a witness in court proceedings by any parties to the mediation. Now, the qualities of a mediator. It is necessary the mediator must possess certain basic qualities, should have complete, genuine, and unconditional faith in the process of mediation and its efficacy. They must maintain high standards of honesty, integrity in conduct and behavior. They have to maintain neutrality, objectivity, and non-judgmental. Ability to be an attentive, active, and patient listener. They must have patience, persistence, and perseverance. They must have good communication skills, open-mindedness, and flexibility, empathy, and creativity. Next one is publicity and advertising. Mediator must not engage in misleading or deceptive publicity or advertising. The mediator must not make any false or misleading statement, including statements or claims as to the mediation process, its costs and benefits, or the mediator's role, skills, or competence. Another one is fees and other charges. The mediator must fully disclose the mediator's engagement, terms, and fees to the parties. The better practice is to record in writing the arrangement in respect of fees and costs. A mediator should not agree to a fee which is contingent upon the result of a mediation or amount of settlement. Next one is termination of mediation. A mediator may terminate a mediation if the mediator considers that any party is abusing the process or there is no reasonable prospect of settlement. The mediator, if appropriate, should inform the parties and may terminate a mediation if settlement is being reached that to the mediator appears unenforceable or illegal, having regard to the circumstances of the dispute and the competence of the mediator for making such an assessment, or the mediator consider that continuing mediation result in a settlement, or the one or more of the parties is not acting in good faith. The parties' proposed agreement would be illegal or involve the commission of a crime. Next one is advancement of mediation practice. Mediation should act in a manner that advances the practice of mediation. Mediator promotes this code by engaging in some following: the fostering diversity within the field of mediation. Second one is striving to make mediation accessible to those who elect to use it, including providing services at a reduced rate or on a pro bono basis as appropriate. Participating in REACH when given the opportunity, including obtaining participant feedback when appropriate. Next one is recording settlement. If a mediation results in a settlement between the parties, mediator should encourage the parties to continue the mediation until the parties have recorded terms of settlement in writing and address any enforceability issues. Normally, agreement to record terms of a settlement in writing should be made prior to the commencement of a mediation. A mediator ought to be cautious about direct involvement in drafting the terms of agreement, as the mediator's involvement in drafting may be construed as providing legal advice. A mediator should, however, assist the parties to take whatever steps may be necessary to formalize any settlement agreement and to satisfy the mediator reading the enforceability. Another one is, it's not in the slide, is a safety in mediation, where it appears that minor children or vulnerable adults may be affected by an agreement. A mediator should encourage participants to consider their safety. So these are all the code of ethics and code of conducts mediators should maintain. Regarding ethics, I recall the quote of great German philosopher Immanuel Kant, who said that in law, a man is guilty when he violates the rights of others. In ethics, he is guilty if he only thinks of doing so. These all are the code of conduct universally accepted, which the mediators must follow in the mediation process. Now, there are two more important matters mediators should bear in mind: the impasse in mediation. What is impasse? During mediation, sometimes parties reach in an impasse. It's a standstill, deadlock position. So in that situation, it may be three types: emotional impasse, substantive impasse, procedural impasse. And to overcome this impasse, there is some techniques to break this impasse. It's the reality testing, brainstorming, which I have discussed to you earlier, allowing the parties to vent their feelings and emotions, focusing on the underlying interest of the parties, starting all over again, or changing the topic to come back later, or observing silence, or changing the sitting position. Sometimes it works to break the impasse. Basically, the intention of the parties is the main thing to break the impasse. Next one is body language, which is very important because it reflects the neutrality issue. The appropriate body language listener indicates the speaker listener is attentive. First one is symmetry of postures. It reflects mediator's confidence and interest. Comfortable look. It increases the confidence of the parties. The smiling face, it puts the parties at ease, and leaning gently towards the speaker, which is a sign of attentive listening. Proper eye contact with the speaker, it ensures continuing attention. So these all are the things the mediator should consider when performing a mediation. Now, in conclusion, what I'm saying that mediation requires cooperation for both parties. Ultimately, the mediation, both sides coming to the table and working towards a resolution. If one side refuses to do so, then mediation may not work for you and successful resolution will not be reached. Sometimes persons dealing with mediation do not have adequate knowledge and experience, for which mediation also fails to become a success. As we heard from Justice Iman Ali, that arbitration process is not working in Bangladesh properly, and there is about 4 million cases pending. So arbitration procedure in Bangladesh is a lengthy procedure now, and also the award, the arbitration award, it can be challenged up to the appellate division. But you see in mediation that as per section 89A, no appeal or revision lies against the agreed settlement. So you can stop and aim to a litigation here. It is a very common course in the judicial domain, said by William E. Gladstone, that justice delayed is justice denied. Also, Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Delayed justice even sometimes fails to give proper remedies to a winning party. We all have to keep in mind to all this course for judicial system to open the door of justice and ensure it for all. The mediator is the guardian of the process. Without strictly adhering to the ethical standards, the mediator would not be able to reflect on the precepts of Bhatna, Vatna, and Latna to enable the parties to move forward a settlement. If the parties have reposed their faith and trust and decided to try to resolve their dispute through mediation, it is crucial that the sanctity of the process is maintained, which is dependent on the ethical standards to be followed by the mediator. Only then one process is be an effective and rewarding one for both the mediator and the parties involved. At the present stage, there is no gainsaying that mediation is emerging as a viable alternative. Rather, it is still at a very nascent stage in Bangladesh. The true potential of mediation still remains untapped. Our country is developing very rapidly. Many foreign companies are now investing in Bangladesh. Therefore, effective steps towards alternative dispute resolution is needed to make Bangladesh an investment-oriented country. To develop the field of mediation, it is necessary to have thorough research, studies, and training by establishing an international mediation academy in Bangladesh. Also, we need to be a signatory of Singapore Convention. Experience worldwide has shown that mediation facilitates high settlement rate, and most people are satisfied with the outcome of mediation. Considering the advantage of mediation in the legal field, I'd like to quote Joseph Greenbaum, an ounce of mediation is worth a pound of arbitration and a ton of litigation. We are celebrating Mujib Borsho, the 100 years of birth anniversary of father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And we can show respect to him only by fulfilling his dream, who wanted a change in the traditional judicial system of Bangladesh by introducing alternative dispute resolution, which our Honorable Mr. Justice Iman Ali has pointed out earlier. Therefore, we all have to come forward to overcome the problems of judiciary for the greater interest of the nation and to ensure justice for all. From next speaker is Mr. Kevin Berry Brown. He will discuss on the book on Getting to Yes, written by Roger Fish and William Ury. You should all go through it to have proper understanding on mediation. And before I wrap up, I express my sincere thanks to the guests from overseas for their valuable lectures and heartfelt gratitude to the organizers of this training program, especially Mr. Goswami, who is working as a lighthouse for mediation. And frankly speaking, in Bangladesh, I can see light at the end of the tunnel. I wish this training program a resounding success. No doubt this is a year like never before for many of us. I hope and pray that COVID-19 pandemic will come to an end soon and all of us be safe during this period. Thank you all for listening to me with great patience. And I hope that I'm in time. Thank you.
Dear learned friends, any question put to him or proceed? His Lordship, can we proceed?
If there are no questions, then yes, let us proceed,
Yeah.
and maybe we can come back if there are any questions later.
Yes, Lordship, maybe. Now, Mr. Kevin Barry Brown, can I request you to proceed to your presentation to discuss the book that is Getting to Yes. Dear friends, is most important book in our mediation arena. Very, very important book. Now, requesting Mr. Kevin Barry Brown, who is our course director, 40 hours course director of BIMS, and also president of Mediation International, and also president of 12 Luster, and also QAP programs presidents. Now requesting Mr. Kevin Barry Brown to proceed to your subject.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Goswami. It is a pleasure to be here again. I look forward to these courses, and I want to thank Mr. Goswami and the entire BIMS team for putting these together. I'd also like to welcome and say good morning, good afternoon to all of the judges, my learned colleagues, lawyers, mediators, mediator students, all of BIMS, and everybody else that's here today. My topic is an amazing topic. It's on the book Getting to Yes. I'm only here for about an hour or so. So let's jump right into Getting to Yes. It was written, as you just heard, by two gentlemen, Mr. Roger Fisher and William Ury. They wrote this book in, at least the first edition, in 1981, 40 years ago. 40 years ago, and it is still the leading book on mediation. If you haven't read it already, I highly recommend it. It's a very easy read, actually. And there's a lot of information that's there that you're able to read. And it is applicable to all aspects of our lives, whether we are in a principled negotiation with our spouse, our children. It might not work with teenagers because that's a little different situation. But with coworkers, with other judges, with our clients. And if we're able to get our clients to negotiate in this manner, the possibilities for resolution, mutually acceptable resolutions are a lot greater. Now, principal negotiations, that's the key that was coined, or the term that was coined in the first edition of Getting to Yes. The book describes a method of negotiation that, and in this method, it isolates problems, focuses on the interests, and creates new options, helps people create new options. And of course, uses objective criteria to help the parties reach an agreement. Now, since its original publication, Getting to Yes has helped literally millions of people learn a better way to negotiate. Over one of the primary business texts in the modern era, it's based on the work of a Harvard negotiation project, a group that deals with all levels of negotiation and resolution. This book offers some proven step-by-step strategies for coming to mutually acceptable agreements in every type of conflict. Thoroughly updated, it's being revised a number of times, and it offers very forward, universally applicable methods for negotiating. The book was initially designed for negotiators and then became the most valued book on the market for mediators, because we negotiate and we help other people negotiate. All of the information in Getting to Yes is relevant to your role as a mediator, a negotiator, as a third party guiding to others in a negotiation process. So Ury and Fisher spoke to transformative, facilitated, principled negotiations, and they set out 4 basic strategies. Don't bargain over positions, separate the people from the problem, focus on interests, not positions, and invent options for mutual gain. So I'm going to talk about these four principles that they spoke of. And so don't bargain over positions. As a mediator, your role is to control the process, not the people. Don't allow the parties to get stuck in their position. Ask them questions to dig down to find out what the conflict is all about, what is underlying their position, and help them to negotiate on that instead of their positions. This is the cruxes for principled negotiations. Any method of negotiating can be fairly judged with three criteria. It should be a wise agreement if agreement is possible. It should be efficient, and it should not damage the relationship between the parties. Now, a wise agreement can be defined as one that meets the legitimate interests of each side to the greatest extent possible. Arguing over positions is inefficient. And at the same time, being nice is also not the answer. When people are arguing over positions, they tend to lock themselves into their positions. The more they clarify the position, the more entrenched and the more committed they become to it. The more they try to convince the other side, the more difficult it will be for them to compromise. So we don't want our clients, our parties, to be negotiating on their positions. We want to ask them questions to find out what's underlying in order to find out where the negotiation really should be. So the other end of that of the coin is just being nice and giving in. People can do that and it can end a mediation, but the reality of the situation is they're not going to be happy in the long term, and the likelihood of the resolution being sustainable is not there. So there's a lot of value in principled negotiations. And that's the alternative to being overly nice or overly positional. People, as I mentioned, and as is written in the book, separating the people from the problem. The participants should see themselves as working side by side, attacking the problem, not attacking each other. The interests, focusing on interests, not positions. Questions, questions, questions. The more questions that you ask of your parties, the more information that you will obviously receive. Sometimes, we look at options. Options is part of the process, and I'll speak more to that very shortly. But in essence, even sometimes the most ridiculous option can help move the parties to a positive outcome. And the final part of that is the criteria. There has to be some criteria that, some standardized criteria that any of the options need to be weighed by. Is it healthy? Is it legal? Does it impact one's well-being? What are the long-term effects of any solution that one might come to? Okay, so separating the people from the problem. Negotiators are people first. Absolutely. You're dealing with human beings. They're not abstract representatives. They have emotions, deeply held values, and different backgrounds and viewpoints. There are cultural differences. So, as a mediator, we have to be sensitive to the people that are around us. Basically putting yourself into their shoes, empathize with the situation, trying to see the situation from both sides, from both perspectives. This is one of the most important skills that a mediator can possess. If you want to influence your participants, then you need to understand empathetically, their point of view. Understanding their point of view is not the same as agreeing with it. Ensure that each side's concerns are addressed. It's common in a negotiation for the parties to treat unimportant issues or concerns less than they would treat items that they feel are very important. Sometimes the little differences can make a big difference. Little sacrifices a party can make can help lead to a resolution where the other party is more willing to negotiate. Focus on the interests, not the positions. One of the most important and most difficult things sometimes is to find out what's really going on. What are the underlying interests? And as I've mentioned, we find this out by asking questions. For a wise solution, reconciling the interests is what are important, not their position. The interests, they define the problem. The basic problem in a negotiation lies not in conflicting positions, but in the conflict between each side's needs, desires, concerns, fears, hopes. Reconciling the interests rather than the position works for both parties. For every interest, there's usually exists several possible positions that that could satisfy it. How do you identify the interests of the other parties? Like, it's pretty straightforward. We ask questions. It's easy to identify their positions. They come up, they're very straightforward. They'll tell you right away what it is that they want. That's their position. But the interest may not come up right away. And that's why asking questions is of so importance. And it doesn't have to be the mediator that asks all of the questions. Oftentimes, parties that are well-schooled in mediation, are well-schooled in principled negotiations, will ask each other a lot of the questions. Counsel can be responsible for asking the other parties questions, not to interrogate them, but just to find out what's really going on. It can make a huge difference in the in getting to a resolution or getting to yes. Ask why. That's probably one of the most important questions. And ask why not. You know, get them to think about their choice. One of the most useful ways to uncover interests is first to identify the basic decision, and that those on the other side probably see you asking for them. It's not to ask, and then I guess asking yourself why they've not made that decision or why they have made the decision. What interests of theirs stand in the way? If the parties are trying to change each other's minds, well, the starting point is to figure out where their minds actually are at any given time. Considering both sides' currently perceived choices, how do you as a mediator want to affect these choices? What decision do they think you are asking them to make? All really important self-reflection questions that we as mediators should be asking ourselves. I help people make a list. I'm a list type of person. When I have something coming up, I usually have a list beside me of what's going to be happening the next week or what have you. So I believe in lists, and I help make lists for the parties. It helps us to sort through the various interests that each party has mentioned. I also take a lot of notes during a mediation, and I will remind people of what I've heard them say that could be their interests. And I like to label it, put it on the table, so that they're aware of what it is that they're sharing and that we're hearing from them. I think it's really important to acknowledge the other parties or both parties' interests as well, and you're letting them know that they're being heard, that you understand them, and you're building trust with them. Probably the most important thing in any relationship is the building of trust. In any mediation, not relationship, in any mediation, is the building of trust with the mediator. If the trust does not exist, if you're just another person in the room, and there's no history, it's going to be much more difficult for people to be able to come up with a resolution, come up with questions for the other party, and to be able to open up and really talk about their interests. Your last speaker spoke to options as well, and here, what I recommend is expanding the pie before dividing it, or instead of dividing it. Expanding the pie is an English expression that basically means, the example is like a blueberry pie. You have a pie, a cherry pie, whatever it happens to be. And you have, you can cut it into 4 pieces, give each person a piece, and you've divided the pie. But expanding the pie is asking questions about this figurative pie. And obviously, it can be anything else. But if you've got just a pie, you can ask questions about how you're going to divide it. It may appear to be fair to split it in four because there's four people there to eat it, but maybe one of the people is 2 years old, one of the other person is 90 years old, doesn't want pie. So asking and digging into it, expanding the pie gives other opportunities, brings other opportunities and options to be put on the table that can help with the resolution. And that's what getting to yes is all about, expanding that pie so that we can sift through the various options that can be put on the table, the various interests that are out there, and find inventive solutions that are advantageous to both sides. Now, there are obstacles that can come up when you're doing a mediation. Premature judgment, very huge obstacle. There's nothing so harmful to inventing options as a critical sense from one of the parties in the room. I personally use flip charts, and I will handwrite on the board or a whiteboard, whatever it happens to be in the room, and I will handwrite all of the interests and options that they bring up so that they're all up there. If somebody jumps in and says, that's a stupid idea, or I don't like that, they become critical and they're judging the options, which is kind of a deal breaker because it stops people from coming up with ideas if someone else is being critical of them. So I have one rule, and one rule only when it comes to digging up options, and that is no discussion on it. There's no criticism, there's no discussion. All we're doing is listing the options now. Searching for a single answer, another obstacle. Many people don't agree that inventing options is even part of a negotiation process. People see their jobs as narrowing the gap between parties, not broadening options that are available. By looking at a single best answer, or for a single best answer, you're likely to short circuit a wiser decision making process, which would or could have allowed the parties to select from a larger number of possible answers. Basically, staying open and having your parties stay open to other possibilities. The assumption of a fixed pie, I've mentioned the pie scenario. It's when people see the situation as either or. Either I get it or they get it. And when people are thinking along those in that manner, they are not working together, they're working conflictively. And your job as a mediator, according to getting to yes, is to help them work side by side. Thinking that solving their problem is their problem. For a negotiator to reach an agreement that meets his own interests or her own interests, as well as the other person's interests, is what the principal negotiation is all about. Now, the solution to all of these obstacles, separating the act of inventing options from the act of judging them, first and foremost. You want to invent first, decide later. As I said, my ground rules for this is simply no criticism and no discussion on them even. And what this does is it helps to broaden the options on the table rather than looking for a single answer. And believe me, sometimes the most ridiculous options that get put on the table can lead people to come up with a more creative resolution. Basically, what we're doing is, as mediators, we're helping them to think outside of the box. Now, inventing, there's 3 ways or 3 points about shared interests that are worth my mentioning, I believe. Shared interests lie latent in every negotiation. They may not be immediately obvious. Ask the parties, what opportunities lie ahead for cooperation and mutual benefit? What costs would we bear if negotiations broke off? This is going back to the BATNA, the WATNA, and the MALATNA, I think it is. Shared interests. Number 2, shared interests are opportunities. To be of use, you need to make something out of them. It helps to have a shared interest make it explicit, and to frame it as a shared goal. Third point is stressing their shared interests can make the negotiations smoother and more amicable. Now, oftentimes we need to dovetail on different interests, and that's really the differences between two parties sometimes create problems, but differences can also lead to a solution. Many creative agreements reflect this principle of reaching agreement through differences. Differences in interests make it possible for an item to be high benefit to one party, yet low benefit to another. Dovetailing is the process of looking for items that are low cost to one party and high benefit to the other, and vice versa, of course. Objective criteria, I've mentioned this, and this is after you've listed the all of the options that you could list with the parties. You start looking at objective criteria to see whether or not the options fit in, if they are mutual, if they are possibilities, are they do they follow established standards, or is this going to be a precedent? Is it legal? Is it healthy? Is it a part of well-being? All sorts of questions can be asked and answered to determine whether or not the options stay on the table or you start to look at something else. Carrying on a principled negotiation involves two main questions. How do you develop objective criteria? And how do you use them in negotiating? Objective criteria needs to be independent of each side's will and also need to be legitimate and practical. Negotiating with objective criteria, Uri and Fisher suggests 3 points. Frame each issue as a joint that's what I'm looking for. A joint search, I guess, for objective criteria. So we're framing the issues. So for example, let's figure out what a fair price would be. Could be a way of framing something. You know, obviously in a negotiation over money, one person starts high, the other person starts low, and sometimes they can come to a middle ground. But asking the question, what is a fair price, is not saying how much are you willing to pay or how much are you willing to accept. It's what is a fair price. So it's something that they can both potentially mutually agree on, simplifying the negotiation procedure considerably and putting some objective criteria in place. Now, what objective standard might be most relevant before the parties even consider possible terms? You may want them to agree on what the standards are in this particular case, so that they're both seeing it from the same side, working together. If either side starts by giving their position, you know, what a fair price is, I get 100%, ask for the theory behind their logic. Ask questions to find out what that person's interests are. And once you get the interests, that's when the negotiation begins. Reason and be open to research. Reason and be open to reason as to which standards are most appropriate. A principal negotiator is open to reason, persuasion on the merits. A positional bargainer is not. So if you're a principled negotiator, you should be open to some flexibility, whereas a positional bargainer generally is not. The whole idea of a mediation is a principled negotiation, and I've found myself as mediator needing to remind people that this is a principled negotiation and not a battle between the two parties. It's a combination of openness to reason with insistence on a solution based on objective criteria that makes a principled negotiation so persuasive. And the third point is never yield to pressure, only to principle. If either side truly will not budge and will not advance a persuasive basis for their position, then there's no further negotiation. That's really when it ends. If there's no principled basis for accepting it, the parties should assess what they might gain by accepting an unjustified position rather than accepting the next best alternative or the benefit of just walking away. These are individual choices. Individual choices that the parties need to make themselves. Fisher and Urey speak with to different situations in a mediation, situations that might derail a mediation unless they're handled appropriately. Now, Urey and Fisher gave a number of examples, and I think these examples are on target. I've seen all of these examples in mediation over the years. What if one party is more powerful? Well, that's when the BATNA comes in. I've heard the previous speaker, I'm sure others have also spoken about BATNAs, and this is really important. It's so important that people need to understand what their best alternative to a negotiated agreement is, because if what they're being offered is worse than their BATNA, well, then maybe they shouldn't be accepting it. When it comes to power, the most any method can do is to help meet two objectives. First, to protect the party against making an agreement that they should reject, and secondly, to help make the most of the assets that they do have, so that any agreement reached will satisfy both the parties' interests as well, or as much as possible. Now, when it comes to protecting the parties, a major danger is that one party will be too accommodating to the views of the other side. The argument, let's all agree and put an end to this, becomes persuasive. The parties may end up with a deal that they should have rejected. And while it's not your job as a mediator to make sure that everybody gets the best deal that they can in the mediation, we have to be aware of when somebody is making a deal that's not going to be sustainable. So as a mediator, part of your role is to, and I would usually do this in a caucus. If somebody is just being very easily accepting what the other person is offering, I'll talk to them in private, in caucus, as to the reasoning as to why they're accepting this. What do they realize, the decision-making power that they have right now, and discuss with them and their respective counsel other options. People also have a bottom line. A lot of times they'll go in with a bottom line. They have this bottom line to protect themselves. Some negotiators establish a bottom line and nothing's going to change that. It's usually the worst acceptable outcome. Although a bottom line makes it easier to resist pressure, I guess, when it comes to costs. It also limits the ability to benefit from what they learned during the negotiation. If somebody walks in with a bottom line, and that bottom line is the same at the end, they may not have been hearing what the other person is saying, and they may not have been learning from the interests of the other party and the recognition of their own interests. So flexibility is always very, very important. It also can inhibit, imagination. Creativity and imagination are very important in a mediation. And if somebody has a bottom line that they are determined to stick to, it reduces the incentive, I guess, to invent a tailor-made solution, which would potentially reconcile differences in their interests in a way more advantageous to both of the parties. In short, while adopting a bottom line may protect someone from accepting a bad agreement, it may also keep them both parties from inventing and from agreeing on a solution that would be wise to accept. So what if they won't play? They use the term negotiation jujitsu in the book. And if anybody has taken any new jujitsu courses, they will understand it as using the power of the other person in their response, as opposed to attacking. when people continue to use positional bargaining, you can resort to a second strategy, and that is the jujitsu that they speak to in Getting to Yes. And this focuses on what they may do. It counters the basic moves of positional bargaining in ways that direct their attention to the merits of the case. Now, how does this work? The book talks about not attacking their position. Look behind the position. Neither accept nor reject their position. Look for ways to improve it, working with the person's position. Assume that every position they take is a genuine attempt to address the basic concerns of the other side. Ask them how they think it addresses the problems at hand. Don't defend ideas. Invite criticism and advice. Very important words of wisdom from the Getting to Yes book. And as well, instead of asking them to accept or reject an idea, ask them what's wrong with it. Examine their negative judgments, find out their underlying interests, and improve yours and their ideas, and hearing more from their point of view. It's amazing how the parties can have a turnaround in the way they're looking at things when they are actually listening to the other person's perspective. I use a perspective in all of my courses, and oftentimes people have difficulty understanding how two people can see the same thing happen, but have very different accountings of what actually happened. If you ask any police officer, they will give you about an accident and how 10 people witness an accident, two cars hitting each other. And if 10 people are there watching it and see it and report, and then he asks them a question, he receives such different versions of what happened. And it's people interpreting things their own way. Nobody is lying to the police officer. They just saw it differently. They saw it from their own perspective. And these perspectives are so important in a negotiation. And when we hear the other person's perspective coming out loud and clear, one of the mediator's roles is to make sure that the other party has actually heard. Too often, one party is talking and the other party is not really listening. They're thinking about what they're going to say next. So helping them hear what the other person has said, and it's easy to do that. We just reframe, paraphrase, summarize what we've heard as mediators. And this has so many advantages. It lets the person speaking know that they have been heard. It lets them know that you understand, or they will clarify. And it lets the other party hear it again. I mean, I've paraphrased somebody and said, "So did you hear the person, his apology?" "What apology? He never said he was sorry." "Well, yes, he did. You just weren't listening." And these are this is so important, because once people see and hear the other person perspective, it opens up the idea, the way forward. Asking questions, pausing, use silence. Silence is very important. When we use silence, or when we've asked a good question and the other person doesn't answer right away, use that silence, leave that silence, leave the dead air, let them think it through. It usually means that a very good question has been asked, and it's important to give the person time to be able to come up with an answer. If the mediator or the other party jumps in with another question, the person who was being silent now has a choice of which question they're going to answer, and they will likely answer the easier of the two. What if they use dirty tricks? Jürgen Frey called this taming the hard bargainer. Tricky bargaining tactics that are, in effect, one-side proposals about make it difficult when people are saying they're willing to negotiate, but they're not willing to negotiate. They have a position, it's fixed, and they have no intention on changing that. To counter them, you have to engage in some principled negotiation about the negotiation process. Oftentimes, if one of the people will be positional, and it takes a great deal of work to get them to into a principled negotiation frame of mind. So some of the things that you do is recognize the tactic, recognize what they're doing, learn to spot particular ploys that make you feel uncomfortable, and or that maybe even indicate some deception is happening. Raise the issue explicitly. Name the elephant in the room. Don't ignore it. Discussing the tactic not only makes it less effective, it can also cause the other side to worry about alienating you as the mediator. Simply raising a question about a tactic may be enough to get them to stop using it. We've all seen people use specific tactics. It might be aggressiveness when they half stand or they stand up in a room, and that stops the other person from continuing. It could be banging on the table. It could be rolling their eyes. There's a lot of tactics people can use, and labeling them generally stops them from using it. I see that you're rolling your eyes right now, and I'm wondering where that's coming from. Usually stops them from doing that again. Question the tactics, the legitimacy and desirability. Bringing it up gives you the opportunity as the mediator to negotiate about the rules of the game. The negotiation focuses on the procedure, how the two parties will negotiate, instead of the substance of the negotiation. So what are some common tricky tactics? Well, phony facts, knowingly making false statements. People have been known to do this, especially in a mediation. Ambiguous authority. I always ask my parties, excuse me, if they have the authority to make decisions, and they need that authority, or they need to have somebody very close at hand by phone if it gets to the point where the party is not able to make a decision and has to go above their head. One of the tactics that I've seen people use is that after they have pressed the party very hard, and they're ready to sign an agreement, that they announce that they have to take it to somebody else for approval. That can really throw a negotiation or mediation for a loop. It can change the entire manner of how things can or are being perceived as moving forward. Normally, what I will do in those situations is I will say to the parties, okay, this party needs to take this home tonight to speak to his wife, his boss, whomever. And so everything that we've agreed to today is now draft form. And the other party can also go home, think it through, discuss it with whomever they need to talk about, and then come back the next day or the next scheduled appointment with the authority. So what I'm doing is, if it is a tactic that the person is using, I'm giving the other person a little bit more power to be able to do the same thing. In other words, it's all now draft again, and we may have to start from square one. This can sometimes what I've seen happen is, well, I just need to make a phone call now. It's not overnight. They just need to make a phone call. So they go in the other room and they make a phone call, and they come back with a solution. Stressful situations. And be aware that the setting of your mediation, maybe you've done it 100 times or 1,000 times and you're very comfortable in it, but oftentimes the people that are there, this is their first time in a mediation, and they may be stressed out. Using humor can sometimes relieve the stress. And people need to be comfortable. So recognize that they may be nervous, they may be stressful, and they may need something to help them be more comfortable in the situation. It can be something as simple as a nod and a smile, or it can be something more elaborate, like coffee and tea or what have you. Personal attacks. This is also a tactic that people will use if they feel that they're losing an argument. They will go on the or losing a negotiation. They will go on the offensive and start attacking the other person personally. I don't allow that. No mediator should allow that. That's not the purpose of a mediation. I think you've all heard of the good guy, bad guy routine, where people will team up in order to get their way. Threats are being used. If you don't agree with this, well, this and this and this is going to happen. Having a hard-headed partner. That's when this is kind of like the good guy, bad guy routine, but it's when one party is not yielding, and then one person comes in and is able to blame it on the other their own partner, and try to negotiate with them. It's kind of like purchasing a vehicle, and they have to ask their manager, and then they leave for 15 minutes to try to convince you, come back and try to convince you to spend more money or get more add-ons to the purchase. Hard-headed partner, good guy, bad guy, all tactics that people will use to manipulate a mediation. And you will see them. I'm sure you've seen them if you're past judges, you've seen them, the lawyers in the courts using these different tactics, and you will see them again in mediation. Sometimes there's a calculated delay. Frequently, one side will try to postpone coming to a decision until they think that it's more favorable for them and disadvantageous to the other party. Sometimes they do a take it or leave it situation, where as an alternative to explicitly recognizing this take it or leave it tactic, consider ignoring it at first, is what I would generally do. I'll keep talking as if I didn't hear it, or change the subject, or perhaps introduce other solutions. If you do bring up the tactic specifically, let them know that, let them know what they have to lose if there's no agreement going to be reached, and look for a face-saving way to get them out of the situation. It's always helpful. And the final point is, don't be a victim. Whatever you do, be prepared to fight against dirty bargaining tactics. As a mediator, you're there to make things work, to have them flow, have it be a principled negotiation. And if they're using dirty tricks, you have different ways of addressing this, either in the room or in a caucus. And don't let any of the parties be a victim either. So, summary. There are the 4 points that I put up at the very beginning. Don't bargain over positions. Separate the people from the problem. The person is not the problem. The problem is the problem. Focus on their interests, not their positions, and help them to invent options for mutual gain. As I mentioned earlier, Getting to Yes was initially designed for negotiators, and then became the most valued book on the market for mediators and other negotiators as well, of course. All of the information in Getting to Yes is relevant to you as in your role as a mediator, or as your role as a negotiator, or as a third party guiding two people, or any other negotiation process that you become involved in on a daily basis. I have found that so often I find myself being a mediator outside of the mediation. There was a time I recall once my wife saying, "Kevin, don't mediate me." I was addressing things the way I do in a mediation, and I was asking for her interests, her underlying thoughts, and she just felt it was I was being too much at work, and she wanted me to be in the husband role and tell her what I thought and tell her my opinion. So sometimes we can get stuck in our mediator's role, and that's okay, but it's good to be reminded. As I mentioned, the book describes a method of negotiation that isolates the problems, focuses on interests, helps to create new options for the party, options that might be outside of the legal realm, not anything illegal, but just outside of what a judge would be able to determine based on the facts in the case. The parties can come up with their own solutions, their own options that might work better for them. By expanding the pie instead of dividing it, we can assist parties to come up with creative solutions that work for everyone involved and creating that oft sought after mutually collaborative resolution. By using Getting to Yes, if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend that you read it. If you have read it, it will become your go-to book. And it will get to a point where you have, if I showed you my copy, it's got highlights all over it and thumb marked pages because I've read it quite a few times. And I've flipped through it a number of other times. By utilizing this book and the proven principled negotiation step-by-step strategy for coming to mutually agreeable resolutions for every sort of conflict, we're essentially opening up the door to an improved method of negotiation that allows the parties themselves to decide on the ultimate outcome. So that is all I have for you today. I'm actually completing mine in time or on time, or actually with some time left over. If there are any questions, I'm available to take your questions.
Dear learned friends, any question?
Okay, good afternoon, Kevin. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Arup Ratan Shaha. I'm a faculty member, Department of Law. I was just thinking that in one point you were discussing about protecting the parties, and sometimes it gets problematic when one party becomes very much accommodative. Is saying everything that, okay, I'm fine. So I was thinking that if in a mediation, one party is very powerful and other party is very less powerful, and the less powerful party is like this party is becoming very accommodative, he is accommodating everything, then how do you protect the interest of this less powerful party?
Yeah, that's a really good question. People that are accommodating, and that's one way people respond, one way people there's the fight or flight mentality that when you have a conflict, you either run away from it or you fight for it. Some people are very accommodative, and they're accommodative in all aspects of their life. And there are times when I think being accommodating is very important. I'm going to Canada in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to see my mother. And my mother likes to go to this specific restaurant for lunch. I don't like the restaurant particularly. It's kind of boring. I'd much rather take her to a nicer place. So this is where she likes to go because she used to have a date night with my dad when my dad was alive, and that's where they would go. So what do? I go there with her. I take her there. We go there. I accommodate that because the relationship is more important to me than where we actually have lunch. And this is important. This is an important thing for people to do, to be accommodated. The problem, as you have identified, is when somebody is always accommodating the other person because that's just their way. I don't see that too often when it comes to a mediation, but if I do, or when I do, I probably would not be talking to them about it in session. I would have a caucus with them and with their representative. And I would say to them that very clearly that, you seem to be accommodating. It's just, we're looking for a long-term solution here. You've told me in private that you want this and this and this, and now you seem to be agreeing to not have this and this and this. And I want to make sure that this is what you want to do. If they don't have a lawyer, this is the point where I would tell them that you should have a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice, but what I can do and what I can help with is suggest to you that speak with a lawyer, find out what your rights are here, and don't give everything that if you don't need to. The whole idea is a principled negotiation where everybody walks away happy, and you're not going to be happy if you give everything up. So that is protecting the parties. That's reminding them that they can either have a lawyer, or if the lawyer's there, I'll be asking the lawyer, says, kind of, what are you doing? Are you there to represent the person? And this is your job, not my job. Do you want to have a conversation with your client? Just two of you, and then you can come up with a way forward. That's probably how I would do it. I wouldn't necessarily mention it directly in front of the other party, because they're probably feeling pretty good that everything's going their way, but for how long? Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking, can you please elaborate one more point where you say that solving a problem is their problem? Like maybe you wanted to ensure that the third party's interest is not addressed there. It is the party's interest which should be addressed. So can you please elaborate this point a bit, if it's possible?
I'm sorry, say that again, the last part?
Yeah.
Your question?
In one point, you have mentioned that solving a problem is their problem, is the
Right.
party's problem. It's not it's not that the third party's interest should be addressed there. I guess that is the point that you have mentioned. I was thinking that what could be the tricks to single out party's interest apart from the third party interest?
Okay, the third party shouldn't have any interest whatsoever in the outcome of the mediation. So I think we agree there. The third party, the mediator, is there to facilitate the conversation between the two or more parties to get them to come to their own conclusion and solve their own problems. If I walk in there as a mediator and tell them what to do, well, then it's my solution, not theirs. And how long is my solution going to last? Probably not that long. The whole idea is that they figure out the best way for them. What I think, long time ago, I was a mediator with this in this community, and I had the same argument, conflict come up constantly. In the apartment buildings, there was no carpeting, and people would wear the shoes, and they would be very loud, and the dog would run across the floor and scratch, and it would drive the people underneath them a little bit crazy because of all the noise. So one group said, well, why don't you just put a carpet down in the living room? And that solves their problem. The next time I had the same situation come up, I couldn't tell them, well, why don't you put a carpet down? Because that's me solving it. I had to spend that extra time having them come up with the with the solution. So it's the best suggestion I can give you is it's all in your questioning. In my course, there's there are 8 questions that I ask, that I provide to people as questions that can help another party bring out some really good answers from the other party. So questions are, I call them the peach BFVs. Priorities, perspective.
Legal term.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it can be P for, there's some noise, I'm not sure what's going on. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, all right. I think somebody's mic is on. Anyway, so Peach BFE. P is for priorities, expectations is the E, A is for assumptions, assumptions. C is for concerns. H is for hopes. B is beliefs, fears, and values. Peach BFE. Asking people questions using those words makes all the difference in the world. They're the 8 top questions that is almost guaranteed. What was your expectation when you first heard about this course? When you heard that Kevin Brown was going to be doing a speech, what were your hopes? What were your concerns? And these are questions like, so did you like the course? Yes or no? Very close question. So these questions can be asked in almost any situation. I developed them with other people years ago. Actually, I didn't develop them. I started using them years ago. And when I first became a mediator, this was my go-to. Imagine, you're brand new in the job and you're sitting there and you've got 2 people that are paying you to help them. And you're sitting there and all of a sudden I don't know what to say. You just see a blank wall. These were my cheat notes. These were my cheat questions. So, so tell me about your priorities when it comes to, what do you think of the other person's perspective? What concerns you most about going back to work with the person tomorrow? These were my go-to questions to help me out of some awkward situations at the beginning. So that I give to you and to anyone else that wants to use those.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Apurva, any question put to Kevin Brown?
Okay.
Nobody else has any question. I have a request of Kevin. And that is, we've heard from you as well as from many others of our trainers about positions and interests.
Mhm.
I wonder if all of us have understood, because this is a very important concept, positions and interest. Not to go after positions, but to see what their interests are, because everyone can easily take their position and dig down and not comply or not go ahead with the mediation. But if you can get into their interests, maybe they can solve their own problems.
Mhm.
Now, has everyone understood about positions and interests? And perhaps Kevin could give some examples of
Sure,
how,
Justice.
what you mean by positions and interests, so that it's clear for all of us. Please.
I can do that. Sure, absolutely. As soon as I think of one. Okay, all right. I go to my boss, and I tell my boss that I need $5,000 more a year in order to stay working at this company. That's my position. I want $5,000 more a year. My position. His response is, Kevin, I have no money. It's not in the budget. I have zero. I can't help you. I can't give you any more money. And so then I can say, okay, well, give me 4,500. And his answer is, Kevin, I have zero money to give. I can't. I have no money. These are our positions. So my boss though happens to be schooled in principal negotiation. So he starts asking me some questions. So Kevin, you came up with that figure of $5,000. Why $5,000? What's going on? Why not 10,000? Why not 2,000? I don't have any, but tell me why. And so we start talking, and then I let him know that my wife lost her job, and she's no longer working right now. I've got 2 teenagers, and it's summertime, and they're out of school. And in the past, they used to get jobs, doing whatever, and they're unemployed, and so that costs me more money as well. And with COVID, there's not as many job openings as there used to be, and my mortgage is very high. So I'm telling him what my interests are. I'm sharing with him interests, and I'm sharing them because he's asking me some questions. So now we have my position. I want $5,000. His position, zero. And now let's negotiate on my interests. My interests are my wife is unemployed, my kids are unemployed, and I've got a high mortgage that's coming due and it's going to be higher. So now we have some other things that we can negotiate. We can negotiate on the interest. I didn't go in there asking him for a job for my wife. I went in there asking for $5,000. The answer to that is no, but maybe there's some groundwork that the kids can do, my teenagers can do. Maybe there is a job that my wife is skilled in that she could do. And she could make a lot more than $5,000 a year and solving a lot of our problems. So once we start to negotiate on our interests, that's when we start to open up that, expand the pie, see what else is possible, what other options are there. And that's just a really simple, straightforward example of if we negotiated on my position, what I want, we're going to get nowhere because he has no money and I need money. So, and he doesn't have it. So it's a useless conversation. I go looking for work in somewhere else. But once we started talking about interests, and the way we started talking is through questioning, that's when we start to find other things that we might be able to negotiate on that can help resolve both of our concerns. You're welcome.
Sir, I want to know an information from Kevin Brown, sir.
Yes, please go ahead, ask the question.
I want to know an information from Kevin Brown, sir.
What type of information they are learning?
Sir, if the both parties are agree to mutual amicable settlement.
Mhm.
In this moment, their lawyers treated them and obstacle. When can I any step against the lawyer? Sir,
Um,
this is my question.
so your question, as I understand it, is that the two parties with their lawyers have come to a mutual agreement. And you want to know when you can step against the lawyers or when you can contradict? I'm sorry.
I think the question is that parties are more or less in agreement, but
Right.
then the lawyer says to the party, no, don't agree. We can get more. What to do
Well,
against the lawyer?
yeah, okay, I understand the question better. Thank you. That's not an easy situation because you're dealing with two sets of people. You're dealing with the parties who are there to resolve something, but they're being represented by their lawyers. That's what they're paying their lawyers the money for. So that's who's giving them their independent legal advice. And quite honestly, I have never gone against what the lawyer's advice is because that's their lawyer's job to do that. I have been asked by people, do you agree? And usually my answer is something to the effect of, it's not up to me to agree or to disagree. This is your lawyer's advice that you're receiving. But I'll be honest. I'll also make it clear that this is a very touchy situation, a very awkward situation, because I can't be seen or perceived to give legal advice. And that's usually the point where the lawyer will say, well, we're not asking for legal advice. We're just asking for your opinion on this. So the lawyer there is asking me for my opinion, and I'll speak up in those situations. I'll say, well, from what I've seen in other cases, the settlement seems to be par for the course. Oftentimes people come to me as a mediator because they want me to tell them what cases have gone through court, what precedents have been set. They want a subject matter expert to be there helping them in the mediation. There's subject matter experts and then there's non-subject matter experts. When it comes to the field of civil and criminal or mercantile types of mediation, oftentimes the parties through their lawyers will hire a mediator or choose a mediator that they know and that they know has dealt with these situations in the past. So they will want that input from the mediator. In those situations, it's not really a facilitative mediation. It's more of a directive mediation. And if that is the will of the parties and their lawyers, well, then I can do that. I imagine that would be something similar in Bangladesh, but Justice Ayman can obviously answer better that than myself. But I guess the short answer is I don't.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
I don't
Yes.
disagree. The short answer is I don't disagree with the lawyers until they give me permission to, basically, until they open up that door.
Now, if I may say so, Kevin, you're the expert. I'm not such an expert at all. In fact, I'm not an expert. I claim that. But what I would be tempted to do in such a situation is have all the parties present and their lawyers and say, right, let's put this in perspective. A wanted this, and these are the reasons he gave for wanting this. And B wanted this, and these are the reasons that he gave for wanting these things. And at the end of the day, after discussion between A and B, with the help of their lawyers C and D, A and B have come to a mutual agreement, so far as we could see, that A will accept this and B will accept that. Now, this is the conclusion that we are at right now. Now, I'm concerned with A and B coming to a decision which they both agree to. Now, if both A and B agree and have, after the discussion, come to a mutual agreement, then can we have that on the table as your agreement? In spite of what your lawyer may have advised you, you decide. But this is what you came with, this is what B came with, and you have agreed to A, B, C, D, D, whatever. In principle. If you both agree now, we can put it down as an agreement. If you don't agree, if you want to think about it again, we can come back tomorrow and finally you give your decision. Would that be a wrong approach, Kevin?
No, that's absolutely fine. I don't see any difficulty with that approach in the slightest. It's essentially what you're doing is summarizing, reframing, helping them come to something that's mutual. You're seeing what both parties have put together, and you're talking about the elephant on the table. And here you go. This is what you have, folks. Do you want to sign it or do you want to come back tomorrow? You're giving them that option to speak. I have been in a situation. I recall one mediation where the party asked for a private caucus with me. And of course I said yes. And so I got up and his lawyer got up and he said, no, not you, just the mediator. He didn't want his own lawyer in the room with him. Now that was unusual. That was unusual, but that's his prerogative, absolutely. And so essentially what he said was, I've listened to my lawyer. I agree with what most of the lawyers are saying, but I'd like to resolve this, and I think we can do this by doing this, this, and this, and let's present that to the other side. I don't want to argue anymore. So yeah, so there are different scenarios all the time. Absolutely, sir.
Maybe Madam Apurva put a question through chats, Mr. Kevin sir.
Kevin, have you seen the question that's been put to you in the chat box?
From Apurva, I just opened it up now, yes.
Okay.
Okay, young mediators who are just starting out in the field. Okay, great question. My Peach BFVs, I strongly recommend that you write those down and you remember them and have them on a little cheat sheet beside you when you go into a mediation. Practice using those Peach BFVs in your entire life, because it doesn't have to just be used in a mediation. These are things that you can use with your husband, your wife, your neighbors. They're great questions. They work with everybody, except in my experience with teenagers, because teenagers have their own way of thinking and dealing with things, and it's very different from the rest of the world, the rest of the population. So I think that's probably the first and most important thing that I would say. Be yourself. Oftentimes people will follow another mediator and they will emulate that person's style and being, and they will use the same words that mediator has used. And that can work, but it can also work against you. If you're using words and terms that you're not, they don't usually use, and they're foreign to you, well, then you're going to come across as being phony. So try to use your own language that works for you. I'll give you an example of something that I had. I was doing mediation for a group of people in the Canadian military. And these were soldiers, big guys. And they spoke strongly about the war and what had happened, etc. And I remember one guy saying to me, he says, so it was a training course that I was doing. It wasn't a mediation, it was a training course. And he said, so we're going to have to talk about our feelings today. And he rolled his eyes when he said his feelings, because he just did not want to talk about anything personal. And so what I did was and that was the term that I use all the time, but I realized that it can impact some people by using this term. So I just said, well, no, but we can talk about, how you were impacted by that. Well, okay, that's fine. That's fine then. It's the exact same thing. It's just using different words. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is know your audience, know who it is that you're speaking with, know what might be triggers for them, if you can at all, and try to, obviously be as respectful as you can with all of your clients, all of your visitors, whatever the term you use, parties, clients, visitors. Be culturally sensitive and aware. I do mediations. This might not be the case for you or for all of you, but I do mediation cases right across the globe, and culture can play a huge role when it comes to communication and negotiation styles. When I was in Thailand, they wanted something very directive. They wanted me as the wise person, as they called it. It could be a shaman, it could be an elder. They wanted me to make the decisions for them. That was the type of mediation they liked, that they wanted. That's not my style. I am more facilitative, so I will facilitate the conversation for other people to do it. But know your audience, know what it is and which culture that you're working with, because they may have different expectations of the mediator, and it's always good to find that out. As I mentioned, I do mediations all across the globe. So culture, as I said, can play a big role. And I always try my best to find out about the other person's culture. I'll do that in private in the pre-mediation meetings to find out if culture plays a role, or if it's a factor at all. Sometimes it is, other times it's not. Off the top of my head, I'm sure there are other things that take notes. Take a lot of notes. When you get busy, you're going to be handling multiple mediations, and it's very easy. You won't think so at the time, but it's very easy to confuse the mediations and to maybe forget that something was confidentially shared with you in a caucus, and you're not to reveal it to the other party. Take a lot of notes and document anything that is confidential so that you don't accidentally mention it later on. When I talk about confidentiality, make sure that there's not even one single leak of information from your mediation from you. And basically all you have to do is break confidence once, and your reputation is tarnished. It will be next to impossible to find work or to have anybody, because it goes around very quickly that you're not maintaining confidentiality, or that you're sharing information, and that trust is then gone. So maintain that confidentiality as much as humanly possible. And that's what I have off the top of my head. And good luck to you, to all of you.
I have another request, Kevin.
Yes.
My brain is like a sieve. I know you told us about Peace BFE, but I've already forgotten what Peace BFE stood for.
Okay, sure. So
perhaps it might be an idea actually to write it down, and so that we can copy it and take it and digest it.
Okay, it'll take me a minute or so, because I'm a slow typer, but I can put it into the chat. Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin, sir. Thank you. Dear friends, if no question, then I am requesting especially Honorable Justice Muhammad Iman Ali, who performing functions of the Honorable Chief Justice of Bangladesh. Closing after some words.
Thank you, Mr. Goswami. Well, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Goswami, as well as all the participants, the trainee. Well, I can't say trainee anymore, because you are now all trained mediators. Today you have graduated to the position of mediators, and soon enough you will have a certificate to show that you are an accredited mediator. I remember many, many years ago, when was it? Exactly 28th of July, 1978. I had completed my course as a barrister. Before call, I was a student barrister. And on that day, I became an utter barrister. In other words, I'd completed the course and successfully passed my exams. But during the call, the treasurer of the inn said, "Today you are an utter barrister. But I can assure you that we have not been able to teach you all the law, because that is impossible. It cannot be ever possible to teach everyone all the law, no matter how much you teach them, because the law is changing every day. But he said, I hope we have taught you where to find the law." So the aim was not to teach everyone about all the law, to teach everyone about everything under the sun relating to law, because that is impossible. But the important element of the teaching was where to find the law. So here we have taught you what, from some of the mediator trainers that we have heard the last 5-6 days, what they would do, what they expect you to do. They have gone through certain tests, certain problems, and you have answered. Some of you have answered so well that we believe you are perfect mediators. Some of you have still yet to grasp that mediation is not justice, delivery like a judge. But nevertheless, the exposure that you have all had is going towards making you a mediator, an experienced mediator, but experience only comes after practical use of your knowledge and after dealing with real life cases. That's when you will develop yourselves. You can take examples, as Mr. Kevin Brown said. Look at others for their examples, but don't try to copy them, because unless you understand what they are saying and what you want to say, you will get into difficulties. But what I say is take everything in. And I said the other day, even look at the YouTube, because there are many examples of what mediators do. There are many demonstrations of mediation cases. Look at them. Try to understand what happened and why it happened. Try to understand the behavior of the people. Now, if you remember, I gave you an example of a real life mediation situation. It wasn't a mediation because I was not the mediator, but I happened to be related to both the parties, and we came to a solution. But then if you look at it, in the course of the mediation that you held, you came with a different answer. The problem was the same, the issues were the same, the parties were the same. My mediation came up with one answer, and your mediation came up with a different answer. But both answers were satisfying to the parties. Both parties were happy in my case, and both parties were happy in your case. That is mediation. But you can see, I hope, that different approaches, different scenarios create different results. But what we're interested to see in mediation is that the result that is achieved is amicable, peaceful, and sustainable. So without spending much more time. You have spent many, many hours with us. I congratulate you. I wish you all the very best in your future practice as mediators. And I hope that this teaching will proliferate, will go to others. You will tell others about what you have learned. You will use your experience and bring peace to people that you deal with in your everyday life. Thank you again for your participation. And thank you again to Mr. Goswami for giving us the opportunity to participate. And I thank all the trainers for the valuable time and input they have given to us. Thank you all very much.
Now, dear friends, we are waiting for day 7, that is dated on 17th December. Many thanks, Lordship. Many thanks, all of you.